Welcome to City of Keene in Focus. Thanks so much for listening. Hello, and thank you for listening. My name is Asa Kramer. Thanks for tuning in to our third episode of City of Keene in Focus. We are recording a little bit later than we normally would due to scheduling intricacies. And I am joined with Deputy City Manager Rebecca Landry and our Public Works Director, Dawn Lucier. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey, Asa.
Let's start off with just a recap of our last council meeting. Can you guys talk to this a little bit? Rebecca was filling in for Elizabeth at our last council meeting due to Elizabeth being out at a conference. Mm-hmm. Can you start off by giving us a little recap?
Sure. We can go over the topics covered at the last council meeting. I definitely want to save some airspace for our Public Works Director because today we are going to start focusing on some of the projects that we have going on that may not necessarily come right off of the council agenda. So I'm just going to breeze over this really quickly. So we had a couple of important public hearings at the council meeting. I don't know if everyone knows how block grants work in the state of New Hampshire, but the Southwest Region Planning Commission is really the administrator for these community development block grants, and they have to have public hearings at our city council meetings. That's a basic summary or simplification of how it works. But they're something that's very important to our community, and we're really grateful to the people who make these grants possible. They infuse hundreds of thousands of dollars into projects that help with things like, for example, the last one at last council meeting was a public hearing for a community development block grant for the second phase of development of the former Roosevelt School on Washington Street. For those who have been in Keene for a long time, they'll remember Roosevelt School as an elementary school. It's also served as the River Valley Community College location in more recent years. And they have a two-phase project there where they're adding at least, if I'm not mistaken, 60 affordable housing units that are 1 or 2 bedroom units to help address some of the shortage of housing they have. They have a very long waiting list for housing. And so they are renovating that building. And it's a two-phase project. The first one has some demolition involved, and they have another grant for that. And now they are applying for community development block grants to make it possible to build more housing in that second phase of that project.
Fun fact about the Roosevelt School project, when I first started about 2 years ago, one of my first meetings that I covered, I believe they were approaching the zoning board to sort of start that project. And this room was full of people in support of that project. So it's really exciting to see it move it along and going through the steps to make it possible.
That's a really good point. And we always like to have people come to meetings. We know it's not convenient, and fewer people really want to come to a meeting in person because there are so many other ways to get your voice heard today. But we're really glad when people come and participate. We understand that people are very concerned about housing. When we talk about economic development, people say, but why if we don't have housing? And when we talk about anything involving the future of our community, people are always saying, well, housing. And so this is a priority. And I think the council made it very clear that in their unanimous support that they care very much about housing as a priority. We also had another hearing about the Community Development Department reviewed an ordinance relating to adding a definition of charitable gaming facility as a permitted use in the Commerce District with restrictions such as proximity to multifamily properties, and there are other restrictions. If anybody's interested in that, I definitely recommend watching that public hearing on the YouTube channel, which is, for us, it's Keene IMS on YouTube. Those were the two public hearings that we had. We did have some communications come in from the public for this agenda. There weren't that many this go round. We had a request from the public about the opportunity to hang a banner on Main Street from one side, from the west side of Main Street to the east side of Main Street. It's something that's been done in other communities, and it would be a way to welcome people to Keene. That's going to go to the MSFI committee on December 18th. And then there was also a request for changes to parking spaces on Marlborough Street, and that's going to go to the MSFI committee in January at their January 22nd meeting. And then there was also a request from a counselor to consider delaying the downtown infrastructure project 1 year, and that's going to go to the FOP committee meeting this week, which would be December 12th here in City Hall. And then we also set a couple of public hearings in January. So there will be a public hearing on January 2nd at 7 p.m. relating to building height in the Commerce District. That's going to be that first January public hearing. There will be another public hearing on January 16th relating to minimum lot sizes in the high density, medium density, and downtown transition districts. So we encourage the public to come and participate. If people can't be here, they can always send letters to the city clerk or to their counselors. There's one thing I wanted to mention. Perhaps Asa would like to ask me about all of the committee nominations and appointments.
I would love to ask you about all the committee nominations and appointments, Rebecca. Would you please speak to that?
We have quite a few boards and commissions here at the city that provide an opportunity for the public to participate in local government. And towards the end of every year, we often see a lot of committee appointments on the council agenda. The mayor is in the process now of appointing people to serve on these boards and commissions. They will go through a number of council agendas before they become official. We really rely on our community to serve on these boards and commissions. We're talking about Planning Board, Historic District, Human Rights Committee. We have a tremendous amount of participation from the public on those boards and commissions. And if you know of anyone who's interested, or if anyone out there is interested in participating, just take a quick look at our boards and commissions webpage. So if you go to the webpage, keenenh.gov, and you click on residents and then boards and commissions, you'll see a list of all of the opportunities for public participation. There's even a form at the top of the page where you can volunteer to join.
And if someone was interested, what is the average term limit? What is an average time commitment? It's not a huge time commitment for most of these.
It really depends. Some of these boards meet once a month, and it's a quick meeting. Some of these boards meet a little more often, and some of them are daytime meetings, some of them are night meetings. So you can really pick and choose based on what your availability and what your interest level is.
Great. And then later on, there were a couple of retirements. We are sad to see these folks go, and we're really, really appreciative of their years of service. That includes Harry McKelvey and Michael T. Cox. We just want to say congratulations to them on their retirements, and we are going to miss them. Just a fun fact, Harry McKelvey, if you listen to a lot of our Facebook shorts or YouTube shorts, Harry McKelvey is the person playing that music. He's a really talented musician. He said he has, I forget how many instruments, but he's got just a zillion instruments, and he dabbles on them all.
It's really fun to learn more about our staff that we might often only see at a council meeting. In addition to being a great musician, Harry's also a great fly fisherman who makes his own lures. So there are there are just these great things we learn about each other. And as a matter of fact, since you brought that up, I should also mention that we have our employee holiday luncheon coming up this week. And that's a rare opportunity for us to really thank our staff by providing a meal that we'll see many employees participating in the serving of this meal to one another. It's just a great way for us to thank each other and to recognize our employees, because it is also an annual recognition and service awards opportunity. So we often have hundreds of years of service represented in those employee recognition awards and service awards. So we're looking forward to having that this week.
So can I ask a question about something that has sort of changed in the last couple of months and is, I think, something of particular interest to the community? And that is the winter weather, I'm going to get this wrong, winter weather parking ban, overnight parking ban.
Yeah, good job.
Thanks. So there's been a little bit of change with that. It used to be that from, I believe it was November 30th through April 30th?
November 1st.
November 1st through April 30th. There was no overnight parking at all. And that's changed. So can you speak to how that's changed? And also it's changed a little bit since it's changed as we've adapted to this particular community's needs.
So this will be a good segue to Dawn in a moment. I will say from a communications perspective, the first two storms, we really worked on playing out our communication strategy with all of the different ways we were communicating, getting people to sign up for text messages and emails. What we found was in the second or third storm that we had, people were getting confused about what to do if the parking ban was still in place during regular business hours on a weekday when parking fees are typically enforced. And so there was some internal discussion about trying to tweak the program a little bit so that our parking bans in the future happen between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. So instead of having them at random times, the advantage of doing it this way would be so that the businesses have plenty of customer parking in on-street spaces near their businesses when they are open. And also, hopefully, it'll help eliminate confusion about where to park during hours when parking is not free. So continuing with this approach of the 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. ban is what we're going to try for the next few storms. And with that, I'd love to hand it over to our Public Works Director, Don.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, and we did do the 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. parking ban during this most recent storm on Sunday. I will say the first couple of storms, we were hopeful that by having the parking ban enacted at different times of the day, we'd be able to do more of the storm response during normal business hours, hopefully reduce some of the overtime costs associated with snow removal. But it has really caused a lot of confusion and uncertainty about where can I park, when can I park there, do I have to move? It was creating some hassles. So we're kind of returning back to the way we were doing it for years and years and years with respect to, the hours. So we'll clear the travel lanes during the day, and at night we'll come back with the crew and clear the parking stalls and all the sides of the road. We are keeping the ordinance the same as it is now. So in the event that we get, the snowmageddon blizzard of 2025, and we really need to get cars off the streets during the day and in order to just keep things passable, we have that flexibility. But our normal process and procedure for, we'll call them routine storms, will be 1 to 6.
So the parking ban then is when the Public Works Director, you have issued a winter weather emergency, and those notifications go out via email, they go out via text, they go out on our social media, they go out, every which way on our website, and that is when the parking ban is enacted.
Right.
Okay.
Per the ordinance, we provide a minimum of 6-hour notice. In the 3 storms we've had so far, we've done well more than that. Typically, we're looking at this like the day before. We're going to need the parking ban and kind of making a decision about what's going to be needed.
And I would add to that, if I may, just that we have worked so hard, like Asa said, on communicating the new parking ban approach so that instead of being 6 months long, it's only when we have storms. But we are starting to issue tickets. So the first phase of the project the changes was for us to really educate people. We did mailings to make sure that we got apartment tenants in addition to property owners. We have done windshield brochures that our police department and our parking folks have been putting out on people's cars that are parked on the street so that they have plenty of information and know where to get more information. So for the first few storms, we worked on really just educating people, and now we are starting to issue tickets. And what we are seeing is that there is a lot of non-compliance, and so those tickets are going to start going out, and we hope that that will help people understand the importance of removing their vehicles from on-street parking. The good news is both the commercial lot and the Gilboa East lot provide options during a storm, depending on what night of the week. And all of that information is on the keenenh.gov/snow webpage.
So one of the things that I've learned in this last week, I spoke to Captain Tenney at the police department, boy, that seems like this last storm we had a lot of non-compliance and you had to issue a lot of tickets and whatnot. And what he explained is that it's really not much more than they would typically see during the first few nights of the parking ban in November. Now it's, the first few storms instead of the first few nights of the seasonal parking ban.
So do we want to dive into the meat and potatoes? We're gonna put you on the spot, Don. It's mostly been Rebecca
both meat and potatoes.
Great. Yeah. There's a lot of interest in the downtown project.
There's a project downtown? Tell me more about it.
Well, why don't you tell us more about it, Don?
Okay. There's actually quite a bit happening sort of behind the scenes right now. Back in July, the City Council approved a preliminary design. The analogy I like to use is there's a conceptual design phase where you're really just looking at what do you want to do. And during that point, we had some crazy ideas that were being talked about, turning part of Main Street into a pedestrian mall, for example. And it was sky's the limit. So you go through that phase and you kind of narrow down the options. Preliminary design is you're putting a little more structure and a little more detail into that. So during that phase, we decided things like, and when I say we, really the City Council decided things like, we're going to include bike lanes in the project, and they're going to be protected bike lanes away from the travel lanes of the traffic. We're going to keep the existing traffic signal around Central Square, and the traffic pattern around Central Square is going to remain essentially as it is today. We're going to modify some of the nuances of it to make it a little simpler and easier to navigate. As part of that, we're going to be able to add a little bit of square footage to the actual green space in the center of the common. That'll be nice. We decided those sort of big picture questions. Right now, we're in the final design phase. So on December 18th, we're going to be coming in with the consultant to MSFI, and we're going to go through a lot of final details. Now we're talking about things like, okay, we're going to be building a bike path. How do we want to designate that bike path? You know, the council said we want concrete. Okay, here's a couple of different ways that we could do a concrete bike path in the downtown. Here's a couple of different options for lighting. Here's a few different models of benches. You know, previously we said we want sort of natural, durable granite benches. Okay, well, here's 3 different ways that you could do that within that sort of framework. So really, this is going to be the finishing touches, if you will.
So it sounds like this is really diving more into like the nitty gritty and what the city council wants these decisions to look like. Am I understanding that?
Yeah, it's really a lot of the aesthetic choices that are going to be made at this point. We know what the elements are, what's getting included in the project. We know what the utility scope is. This is really more about the finishing touches and what the aesthetics of the finished product will be.
Around Central Square, it sounds like it's going to be expanded, which is awesome. I know there had been some questions about the fountain. Is that also going to be discussed at the December 18th meeting?
It will be, and this is sort of happening in parallel right now. You might recall there was a group that came in to City Council, and they proposed a peace pole be incorporated into the project somehow. And at that meeting, when MSFI was discussing it, the idea of making it part of a reimagined fountain feature was kind of proposed. The city has actually put out a request for proposals from local artists to sort of integrate those two things, come up with a design for a peace pole that also includes the water feature. But I think we will be showing a couple of options to MSFI.
Cool. And I just want to make a real quick side note. You might have heard Dawn say request for proposal. That's when you hear, I feel like the city throws around a lot of acronyms. RFP is a request for proposal. Right. So I just want to add that clarification. Yeah. So what else should people expect to hear about on that 18th?
Trash receptacles are going to be talked about. Lighting, like the catenary lighting over the bike trail between Margaritas and Corner News, the transportation center.
That sounds so pretty. I didn't know that was part of the design. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Some design elements for the Railroad Square area. We talked about a lot of it, like how we're going to expand the pedestrian space to make it more usable for events and whatnot. How we're going to kind of define that space with some landscaping and trees. We're moving the bike path out a little bit to the north so it doesn't go right through that pedestrian space, sort of segregating the pedestrian activity from the bike path. That'll be discussed on the 18th. Our consultant actually met with the Heritage Commission a few weeks back, talked to them about what their concerns and suggestions, ideas were for the project. Because obviously the whole aesthetic and feel of this project has such a huge bearing and impact on downtown. One of the things that came out of that conversation, which I thought was fascinating and didn't realize, when the Railroad Square was built back in the 80s, apparently the city did like a fundraiser where you could buy a brick for Railroad Square. But we're trying to look for ways that we can sort of creatively reuse them in the new design. One of the things we're going to be looking at is putting them into these gateways that we're going to be building as part of as the entrance to Gilboa Ave and the entrance to Railroad Plaza. So there's a lot of other things that are happening, like I said, in the background. One of the things that Rebecca has helped us a lot with is coming up with sort of a communication plan. I would love to say this project is going to be easy for the residents and the business community in the project area. It's going to be disruptive, right? That's just the reality. It's a big project, and there's going to be a lot of noise and a lot of dust and a lot of headache. So we're trying to figure out how do we mitigate that? How do we make it tolerable for the folks that are neighbors to the project? So she's been helping me with this communication plan. One of the key elements that I really love that we've come up with is a project ombudsman, we're calling him. It's intended to be somebody who isn't part of the construction team. It's it's not the city engineer's office. It's not the contractor, but somebody who can be sort of a liaison between the business community, the residents, and the construction team. They might not be responsible for solving the problems, but they're the ones that can have that relationship with people, talk to them, find out what the issues are, and then bring them to the team and make sure that those issues, those concerns get addressed. We are going to be advertising for that position here in the next couple of weeks. We've gotten a couple of local, business representatives to generously donate their time to help us select a candidate for that. So hopefully, early in 2025, we'll be hiring somebody into that position. The other thing that's happening right now, we're talking about how we're going to manage the sidewalk cafe licenses. So a couple weeks ago, the city clerk brought forward a ordinance that would have basically made it so we could say, within this geographic footprint that's going to be under construction, no sidewalk licenses for this year. That wasn't terribly well received. So we are sort of back to the drawing board and considering, basically what we heard from the committee is figure out a way that you can accommodate them as much as possible. So over the next few weeks, we'll be trying to meet with some of the business owners, the people that have those licenses, and talking about what we can accommodate reasonably within a construction zone. We've got to come up with sort of a balance between accommodating those sidewalk cafes and also giving the contractor enough flexibility to actually get the work done.
So I think one of the other things coming up in 2025 is, I've heard it called coffee and hard hats.
So that'll start a little bit later. That'll start, once we really get to construction. But the idea is probably once a month, basically just set up a pop-up tent on the square or something. It'll just be an opportunity for folks that live and work in the area to come get an update, talk to the contractor. The contractor will have a rep there. The ombudsman will be there. Either somebody from the city engineer's office or myself will be there. Give folks an update and hear about those problems and the concerns and get free coffee. So, I found a way to get free coffee. That's my goal. We're going to be giving monthly updates to MSFI. So they meet on the third Wednesday of the month. So we'll probably do things like the first Monday or first Wednesday or something like that, so that if people want to keep in touch with the project and find out what's going on, every couple of weeks there'll be an opportunity to learn more.
I think this is a great opportunity for Dawn to share with us the incredible amount of work that your team has been doing between preliminary design and final design, because that's really been a lot behind the scenes. But could you just do a brief overview of what types of technical work has been going on behind the scenes to get to this point?
The stuff that's happening, I find it endlessly interesting, but a lot of your listeners probably would glaze over. But we're really into the weeds, as you said. A lot of it is underground utility coordination. Over the last few weeks, you might have noticed there was some days where the traffic downtown was a little flummoxed. We were excavating test pits to basically wherever we've got utilities that have to cross each other. We have to know exactly how they're going to cross. So, some things are easy. Water you can push down and then back up, but stormwater and sewer, you have to kind of go with gravity, right? So you got to make sure that those elevations are right and that they're not going to conflict. A lot of construction delays and change orders result because there's something in the way that you didn't know about, and now you have to sort of deconflict it on the fly. So to avoid that, we did about 4 days of excavating test pits around downtown where we knew that these critical crossings and these very close tolerances were going to be found, just to make sure we knew exactly where things were and where they were going to need to be. We will be doing some what's called a geotechnical boring. Basically, it's a drill rig that's going to drill a hole in the ground up to, say, 20 feet deep. And we do that for the purposes of knowing what's under the ground. So, for example, a traffic signal is very heavy, and it's got this huge arm with weights dangling at the end of it. If that doesn't have a properly designed base, the whole thing can start to settle and shift and sag. So you have to know how strong the soil is underneath the ground in order to design those correctly. The other thing is, part of the project will be incorporating what we call green infrastructure. So basically it's ways of managing stormwater that aren't quite as environmentally impactful. So, giving that stormwater to trees to drink instead of just flushing it out to Beaver Brook, or finding ways to infiltrate it into the ground so it can be cleaned and the nutrients and the oil from the cars can be removed before it reaches the environment. In order to design those, we have to know, will the ground absorb its water, or is it all clay and it's going to be, like a bathtub? So those sorts of things will be part of that geotechnical work that's coming up the next couple of weeks.
So that sounds like just an enormous amount of work that your team has been doing since the preliminary design until now.
Honestly, Asa, that's the fun stuff.
I'm so glad you're in your role.
Trying to get everybody to agree on what to build, not the fun stuff. Designing the water and the sewer and the drain, that's the fun stuff. Yeah.
This is why we have a really, really awesome engineering team at the city, is that they think this is fun. So that's great.
Other things that we've been working on, when Central Square is all torn up, obviously, some of the events that typically happen within that area are not going to be able to happen there next year. Last week, I met with a group that basically it's a kind of an informal group of all the organizers of all of our downtown festivals and events. And they were getting together to coordinate their schedule and sort of share ideas and collaborate. They invited me very generously to come in and chat with them about the downtown project and sort of share how things are going to be a little different over the next few years. My staff has been working with the police department to come up with basically alternative layouts for events. But essentially, if events happened within up near Central Square or within Central Square, those events are going to be sort of shifted down to the south for next year.
And we have such a involved and supportive community. I have no doubt that people are going to frequent these events all throughout the downtown project, even if they look a little bit different.
Right. So I don't know if you heard, but back in September, we submitted a grant application regarding its idea of a solar pavilion. So the idea of this solar pavilion came out of our meetings a while back. It was before the preliminary design was approved, with the Energy and Climate Committee, as well as the Conservation Commission. And, that we were trying to find a balance where the community has this environmental goal of moving away from carbon and having more sustainable forms of energy. And, one of those things is the street lighting. So we're trying to look for opportunities to switch streetlights over to solar. That ran straight up against the goal of maximizing trees in the downtown, right? Those two goals are kind of mutually exclusive. The idea that came about was, what if we had a solar installation that was sized to provide all of the electricity needed within the downtown, but all in one centralized location? So the streetlights in the project, once it's built, will still be connected to Eversource, but we're going to provide enough electrons from the solar panel array in order to satisfy all of their need, as well as the uses for events and the decorative holiday lighting and whatnot. So to do that, what we're suggesting is building a pavilion on Gilboa Ave. Basically where the farmers market happens today, we're going to build a little covered pavilion. It's not little, it's about 220 feet long, about 30 feet wide. That'll hold the solar array, and it'll provide covered event space. So, the farmers market will have covered space, which will be nice. If it's raining, the Snow and Ice Festival would have a place that they would have a little bit of shelter. That was proposed as part of the preliminary design. But that wasn't part of the original budget when we developed the current CIP. So it's always been in the back of my mind, I love the idea, but I also don't know if it's covered by the current budget that's in the CIP that we've been presenting to the community. Earlier in the fall, we submitted a grant application. That grant, if we're successful, would cover 80% of the cost of that structure. We're expecting to hear about that in January. So that area is phase 2, so it's 2026. So the timing works out that we don't need to worry about, making that part of this contract right now. If we get the grants, that will definitely happen. If not, then we're going to have to talk to the council about whether we want to do it with city funds and what that means from a budget perspective.
What is the overall cost of that pavilion, roughly?
The grant application that we submitted, and I'm going by memory here, but I believe it was about $1.5 million. The grant application that we submitted was for, it's called the Timber for Transit program. It's specifically looking for opportunities to showcase advanced wood manufacturing, and, sort of like how New Hampshire's niche, right, can be used in these advanced structures. So I think the project is a great fit for this grant program. Hopefully the reviewers agree with that assessment. If we are able to get the grant, it would be a pretty innovative structure made predominantly out of composite wood systems.
Well, we will keep our fingers crossed. It sounds really cool. All right. Well, this was exciting. I feel like we covered a lot. Thank you for the recap of our most previous council meeting, and thank you for this overview of the final design of the downtown project. We are looking forward to having a really robust discussion about that on Wednesday, December 18th at 6 p.m. is when that MSFI meeting is going to be. We have a couple of other meetings coming up. On Thursday, December 12th, we have a FOP meeting at 6 p.m. And then, as we mentioned, the MSFI is going to be Wednesday, the 18th at 6 p.m. And then our next council meeting is going to be the Thursday after that, the 19th at 7 p.m. Council's always a little bit later. And we will look forward to recording our next episode. I think you're joining us, Dawn, maybe, to give us a recap of the discussion that we had on the 18th. Perhaps you're joining us?
I'm pretty sure I need to wash my hair that day.
I vote yes.
So yeah, we will look forward to summarizing the discussion that we have about the downtown project at our next podcast episode. Any final thoughts?
So thank you, Asa. I won't get to do this often. It's been fun, and I want to wish everybody happy holidays.
And I should also say thank you to City Manager Elizabeth Dragon for sharing her airtime, giving me a chance to talk about this project. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening to City of Keene in Focus. We'll see you next time.